Anyway, I hope you have energy for a bit more technology. I'll try to make it as simple as possible, as interesting as possible. And the topic today is, as you can see, is reducing risks and increasing agility through automation. But in one word, it's about automation. So whether you're from a bank or another insurance company or a telco, automation is a hot topic everywhere at the moment, especially when we're talking about large-scale customers and environments like yours. And I'm sure it's a familiar word, and it's a buzzword at the moment. So basically, the network is growing and becoming more and more complex. So if in the past, a company looked something like this, new technologies are being introduced, as you know. So always in banks and telcos and large environments, there are many different vendors, whether it's firewalls, routers, different networking equipment, cloud platforms. So networks keep growing and becoming more and more complex. And new technologies are introduced, making it very hard to manage. So just from meeting in these few days several customers here in India, in Delhi, I saw the largest customers I saw in the world. So we have in Tufin more than 2,000 customers, which are the largest operators, banks, etc. But the scale in India is something different. And I think it's not a surprise to all of you. So the complexity is much greater. So part of the complexity, because our scope is firewalls and routers and network, complexity comes in firewalls with 1 million rules in them. 1 million firewall rules. There are firewalls with rules from the 90s, okay? Obviously, it's legacy rules and some things which are not relevant, but they're still there. So these things, as you see, the network keeps growing and growing. And this is a real network diagram of a telco. It looks something like this. Even in our solution, there is a visualization of the network. And in large organizations, it does look something like that. But all of these things, they actually make the business work, right? Because eventually, even in one of your banks, there is a banking application on the iPhone, right? For the application to work, there is a firewall rule that is allowing it to work. If I block this firewall rule, it will result in downtime. And this is something which is common. As discussed before, a breach or downtime of a business application results of millions of dollars of loss. What happens when I have this? And this is the reality for any large enterprise, regardless of the sector. We have this. It means that the more agile the business is, meaning the changes are occurring fast, in a very fast pace, and it's all good. On the papers, it's all good, but you compromise security. And when you compromise security, you expose yourself to possible breaches. And again, same old story that we heard many times today. So what would be a solution to this in your opinion? The solution is basically a process or something we call network security maturity model. So the network security maturity model is a set of steps that organization can take in order to reach maturity, or in other words, full automation. Again, I'm going back to the scope on which we're talking about because there are so many subjects here, payment cards and whatever. We're talking about firewall management and network access management. I don't know how many of you it is relevant to them, but here I am. So the network security maturity model starts, we will go on this automation journey, as I said, and it starts from the current state of the complex network diagram with no change visibility or compliance control. What does it mean? It means that if I have a big, let's say headquarters in Mumbai and an office in Chennai, and some administrator goes on a Chennai firewall and makes a change, you don't necessarily know about it. Even if you have a process through BMC Remedy, ServiceNow, HP Service Manager, it doesn't mean the person follows the process. And if it doesn't, you will never know about it. So the first thing that some of our customers realize when they install this kind of orchestration tool is they get visibility of what they don't know. Okay, so the current state is no change visibility or compliance control. Compliance control means that in order to reach compliance, you have to do an audit. An audit is a manual 3-month, 6-month, 1-year process, right? So if you're in the banking sector, you know that you obviously comply with PCI DSS and different other regulations. It takes time to reach compliance. And sometimes you don't reach compliance and you say, okay, next year I'll do that. But the thing is that it's a manual process and you don't have ever continuous compliance which you can rely on. So as we said, the poor network visibility, slow manual change process. Yeah, apart from the changes being not visible or hidden somewhere, whether it's shadow IT or different scenarios, it's also slow. So I can give you an example. I currently reside in Australia, and I'm working with one of the biggest banks there. And to make a complex network change in that bank takes 50 days. That's average. It's not a maximum or minimum, right? To introduce a new system, of course, you need to write the code, build the servers, but eventually you need to allow the network and the components to speak to each other. This takes many weeks and months. And the reason is because organizations do need to be secure, do need to be compliant, but business is pushing it forward as well. And we kind of lose the balance between the business agility and security. That's what we're talking about here. So we kind of overcome, or the first step would be to gain visibility and real-time monitoring of what's going on. So I'm sure whether, even it's a small bank in India, it's a huge bank in another country. So these subjects are familiar to you, obviously, and without a tool or without a solution that helps you gain the visibility, you don't have visibility, okay? This is just an example. It's a screenshot from our solution, and it shows how we understand the network path of how different application components communicate with each other, and where in the network it's allowed and where is it blocked. As I mentioned before, even for an iPhone app to work properly, and for me to be able to make transactions, there are firewall rules that allow that, right? Okay, when we're talking about the automation part, we are still in the manual changes phase. So the left portion of the model is still the changes are still done manually at that stage. Manually, meaning that people open tickets in ticketing systems and it goes on for approvals and people design the change manually, etc. The second portion of the model is when it comes to compliance and cleanup. So compliance is a big word, right? Or audits, or whatever you call it, regulations. But essentially, it's about allowing or denying traffic between different security zones in the organization. So if we take PCI, for example, it's about allowing only what is necessary from different security zones, right? And micro-segmentation. So this is, again, it's a visualization of our solution of how we provide an innovative approach to manage compliance and micro-segmentation. So what you see on the left side are security zones, and on the top are different security zones. And you are able to define what is allowed and what should be blocked between different security zones. Once you do that, within minutes, you can see the reality, the gap, because this is the CISO's ideal. This is the vision. This is what I would like to see in the organization. The reality is absolutely not like that. But what you get immediately is the gap, are the violations of this thing. To do it manually, if you have 1 million rules in the firewall, it will take you years to do. Because it means you have to go rule by rule and understand where is it going from, where is it going to, which protocols is it talking on, etc. So this is part of compliance automation and continuous compliance. Because once you deploy that, you always know how compliant are you. Not only during the audit, but also a day after the audit. When we're talking about the automation again, because on the lower part of the screen we have the automation journey, here we're already able to automate some cleanup tasks. So cleanup refers to, as we said before, rules that exist from the 90s, when I was 10 years old, you know? Because it is a very scary task to remove rules from a firewall. Because business is terrified if something stops working, right? So organizations just leave the rules as they are. And the reason you reach 1 million rules is because you never optimize your firewall. So in that stage, once through the model you make progress, here you're already able to automate cleanup and say, if a certain rule didn't have a hit within the last year or last 5 years, it's probably not relevant. From a security perspective, it's overly permissive access and I want to limit it and tighten it. And in terms of the new changes that are coming in, the approach that helps you to reach automation is a policy-driven approach, and it means that we are able to automate change requests. So whatever ticketing system is used in your organization, it's basically a digital piece of paper. The ticketing system doesn't know the firewalls. The ticketing system doesn't know what's a protocol. It just, you put in text into a field, you save it somewhere for documentation. But in this kind of approach, you embed the network knowledge into the process of change. So for example, when people request for changes in the network, the computer knows if the access already exists, but the engineer doesn't know, because there are checkpoints, there's Cisco's, there's Juniper's, there's Palo. There's so many components within the network flow. One engineer cannot know that without checking. So, but the computer does, because you just feed the computer and it calculates. So this is how it's possible to automate changes, and this is how with the Australian bank, for which it took 50 days to make a change, we managed to reduce it to 10 days. So imagine the impact of delivering a business application to the market in 10 days instead of 50 days. It's a huge impact. So we're talking about effective change management. And the next step and the final step is enabling the business. So this is where business agility comes in. And this is where business obviously needs changes to happen as fast as possible. Because if the CEO of a bank decides he's going to purchase or introduce a new portal for end users to make payments, he wants it to be working as soon as possible, because this means revenue to the bank. But there are different bottlenecks. There is security that says, okay, of course you want it to be introduced to the market, but it presents security risks. So how do you manage that? So in this part, we introduce something that's called application-driven security management. And this is where, because we understand that all the firewall rules, all the million firewall rules initially came from application and business needs, right? Because as we, I have time to tell you a quick story. I met a company in Europe. It was a petroleum company, and they had the maintenance work on the firewall. So simple maintenance work at night time. The engineer came, did some changes on the firewall, went home, and suddenly all the gas stations in the country, it's about a 60 million people country, not so big compared to India, but still, all the gas stations stopped working for 2 hours. Imagine this happens in India. No gas stations for one company for 2 hours. Next time I drive with my car past the gas station, I will not stop there anymore. So it's a reputation, it's a financial loss, etc. And all because of one firewall rule. Because remember, anything that works technologically has a firewall that allows it to work. Something we tend to not even think about, right? But the firewall people and security people are aware of that. Business people are not. So again, our balance that we talked about. So how do we bridge the gap between the application teams, the DevOps, the business units, to the poor security network operations whose job is actually to protect the network, right? Do you agree there is a conflict between the teams sometimes? So the idea is to bridge this gap and allow collaboration and understanding between the teams. So to create a common language, basically. And the way we do it, if we're talking about Tufin, the presentation is not about Tufin, we can talk about it later, but it's about the challenge, basically. But still, we introduce a common language to these kind of departments, and we help with the collaboration. And all of that to accelerate service delivery without compromising security. So, as we said, phase 3 in the automation journey is application-driven automation. And eventually, and this is something that actually exists in some of our customers in the US and in Europe, zero-touch automation. It means that changes are being requested and they're being implemented with zero touch. So, from 50 days to 2 hours. Okay, can you imagine how significant this can be? Imagine how busy your firewall teams are. You're calling them, asking them for changes, they're busy. We know that. This is our business. I meet customers like that all the time, organizations like that. So, talking about automation, the things that are being automated in order to make business more agile without losing security is risk analysis within the change process, the actual network and the firewall design, the provisioning of the changes, meaning letting the computer to push the changes to the firewalls and routers, and the automatic audit readiness. So you can always be compliant. You don't need to wait 6 months to be compliant for 1 day because the next day you don't know what's going to happen. You can have a real-time view of continuous compliance in your organization, including PCI DSS and different regulations. And this is pretty much it. This is how you achieve or again, it's not a short journey. It can take even a year, but this is how you achieve, or you get close to balance between business agility and security in the organization in terms of network and firewalls.